What is happening in Hong Kong gives us a very, very graphic picture of what will happen in Taiwan if there is a forceful reunification.
Dear friends, welcome to another edition of the Forum 2000 online chat. Today we have a topic which is extremely topical, extremely important, which is Taiwan and how Taiwan is facing increasing pressure from China, and also what should be the global response to it, and what should be the response of international democracies to this situation. To discuss those issues, it is my great pleasure to welcome with us today Chen, Vice President of the Taiwan Foundation for Democracy, and William Galston, Senior Fellow at the Brookings Institution. Welcome, Ketty and Bill. It's a pleasure to have you on the chat today. As you both know, the position of mainland China is towards Taiwan is hardening and is getting more assertive, more aggressive, even over the past months and years. Last year, President Xi Jinping affirmed that there is still a determination on the side of Beijing to annex Taiwan. Eventually, he didn't rule out the use of force. In this regard, there have been attempts and steps in sort of on the disinformation front from Beijing towards Taipei. There have been military exercises conducted facing Taiwan, and all that has been sort of gradually increasing and intensifying. So in response to that, Forum 2000 conference, which took place last month in October, adopted a statement acknowledging those developments and calling on international community to stand up for Taiwan and to not let Beijing bully Taiwan in this way. So my first question, Bill, would be to you. Are you concerned that Beijing might further escalate this position towards the island?
There is always that possibility, and only one man can answer your question, and it's not me. He's some thousands of miles away, but I am very worried about the extent of political power in all its dimensions that President Xi has been able to gather for himself. I am also concerned that China feels increasingly that this is their moment. They have handled the pandemic successfully by international standards. Their economy is recovering much faster than the economies of the West. There are rising nationalist feelings in China, which Mr. Xi has encouraged. The arrival of a new administration, I think, will freeze things in place for a few months until the direction of China policy in the new American administration becomes clear. I don't expect him to do anything destabilizing over the next 3 to 6 months, because that would be really counterproductive from his own standpoint. It would eliminate the chances of a more orderly and regular and predictable relationship with the United States, which my contacts with Chinese diplomats suggest he wants. The instability of relations in the Trump administration has been a source of worry for the Chinese government. So I think the threat is ever present. It's not imminent, but it demands a response.
Ketty, what is the perception from Taipei of all this?
Before I joined the meetings, I just checked that only in the month of November, China has invoked military exercise by flying jets into Taiwan's ADIZ. Today is the 9th time. So it's only the 12th of November. So ever since September, Taiwan has received many flights of the same sort. Other than in the past few years, China taking Taiwan's diplomatic allies away. And this morning, Taiwanese actually discovered that under the videos of the WHA assembly, you cannot even type in the word Taiwan. If you type the word Taiwan in the comment section, you won't be able to post any comments. So this is just happened this morning. So people are aware the intimidation and threats from China. And people on the ground here also are paying very close attention to the U.S. lead up to the U.S. election, and now President-elect Biden's position in China and also in our region. But I think overall, the people of Taiwan, regardless of who were to become the next president of the United States, the support of the United States government in general is really important for the people here. It really, having Taiwan's largest diplomatic ally, a democratic ally, voicing support for the Taiwanese people and their democracy and the democratic way of life in Taiwan is essentially the most important thing, regardless of which candidate were elected. So now people are looking towards the new administration in the United States and how they would support Taiwan's democracy.
Ketty, one additional question. Bill just sort of hinted or indicated, or his analysis was that during the transition period now from President Trump to President Biden, there is probably no aggressive move or destabilizing move to be expected from Beijing, because Beijing essentially wants sort of a calmer, more working relationship with Washington. Do you share that? Do you share that opinion, or do you think that maybe Chinese policy, Chinese foreign policy, and Chinese policy towards Taiwan in particular is not so calculated? I would say it's more basically more based on nationalism or on some more aggressive instincts. What is your reading of that?
I actually heard of the same rhetoric that during the transition, every side is conducting themselves in a manner that is not going to be destabilizing for the region and for themselves. However, as I mentioned, the flying over Taiwan's, intruding in Taiwan's ADIZ did not really stop. So whether once the Chinese side or any side is trying to act in a more peaceful manner and less destabilizing, I think for myself and for the people living on the island, it remains to be seen. Okay.
Bill, in this context, there has been a fresh development recently in Hong Kong, where we take some hints sometimes for what is happening in Hong Kong might in the future be sort of taken as a model for Taiwan, or there is there was this mass resignation of pro-democracy legislators from the Hong Kong legislature, forced by the steps of the pro-Beijing government. So is that something, for example, that you would not think is sort of a bit contradictory to your earlier assessment? Don't you think that maybe Beijing is acting increasingly harsh, regardless of what's happening in Washington?
Well, I don't think it is, and here's why. I think policymakers in Washington have largely abandoned the hope that they can affect Chinese behavior in Hong Kong. It is regarded, regrettably, as a fait accompli. And so the Chinese government, I believe, has correctly calculated that although the West deplores what's going on in Hong Kong, the West lacks the leverage to do very much about it. The situation in Taiwan is very different because the facts on the ground now, are that Taiwan is an independent, functioning democracy whose future relationship with the People's Republic of China should be worked out peacefully on the basis of consensus and agreement. That is the status quo with Taiwan, which is very different from the status quo that the Chinese have established in Hong Kong. And so, the Chinese behavior in Hong Kong is regrettable, but not fundamentally destabilizing to the U.S.-China relationship. Aggressive moves vis-a-vis Taiwan would be a political earthquake in this country that would set off reverberations that would last for years, and I believe would fundamentally transform the nature of the relationship. And I'm sure Mr. Xi understands that. So the analogy between Hong Kong and Taiwan is not a very good one right now, in my opinion. However, my final thought is that what is happening in Hong Kong gives us a very, very graphic picture of what will happen in Taiwan if there is a forceful reunification.
So, do you think that the U.S. administration, regardless of it being Republican or Democratic, is it preparing for the eventuality of this forced reunification?
No, it is preparing to prevent it.
Okay.
One very encouraging sign, from my standpoint, is the strong emphasis that President-elect Biden has given to the unification of the world's democracies. He has promised early in his administration to call for an international convention of democratic governments and forces in Washington. He would personally participate and lead it. In a series of publications, he has made it clear that he sees the protection of democracy and the encouragement of democracy as the central values pillar of American foreign policy. This represents a 180-degree shift from the current administration, and I think it's a very promising development for democracies everywhere in the world, including Taiwan. And I am pretty confident that the new president will try to strengthen the alliance that the United States already has with democratic forces in East Asia and the Pacific. Because the other piece of good news for Taiwan is that President-elect Biden strongly believes in alliances of democracies everywhere, and I think that there will be more assertive democratic resistance to any attempts to overthrow the government of Taiwan and to reunify China through force. Having said that, it is true that in the Obama-Biden administration, Mr. Biden was one of many policymakers in both political parties in the United States who for 20 years entertained hopes that the opening of the global economy to China would set in motion a liberalization that would begin with the economy and then ultimately extend to the society and the polity. And it's only in recent years that many people around Mr. Biden, who will probably be influential in the new administration, have changed their minds about that. One of the leading figures is Kurt Campbell, who is probably well known to Ketty, who served as Assistant Secretary of State for East Asia. And he has written an article publicly acknowledging that his earlier hopes for better relations with China and a more peaceful and liberalized China have not come to pass, and that the United States policy must change accordingly.
Kelly, what Bill has been saying is he's been describing this U.S. Efforts to form a united front of democracies in defense of Taiwan, but also sort of more broadly because we see democracy under pressure on many fronts around the world, and that would be truly welcome if Washington regained the leadership role on this. But from the perspective of Taiwan, what is Taiwan doing to prevent a bad outcome or a bad scenario that can happen? And we have hinted at those bad scenarios earlier in the interview.
During the October 10th national holiday for the Republic of China, Taiwan, President Tsai actually mentioned that her administration is still open for discussion with the PRC when it comes to reaching, I would say, peaceful coexistence of the two entities. And of course, the precondition being that the PRC has to acknowledge the existence of the Republic of China, Taiwan. And also, her position is that her administration will work diligently to safeguard Taiwan's democratic way of life. This is something that the Tsai administration does not compromise. And also, she was very clear in her earlier speeches and public talk that the one country, two system proposed by Mr. Xi is not acceptable for the Taiwanese people. So I think what the current administration is doing is trying to combat the pandemic situation, but not using methods that will infringe on Taiwan's democratic institutions and procedures. But then at the same time, working really hard to form alliances, having good relations with Taiwan's democratic allies in the region, in Europe, in North America. So this alliance of democracy is very well perceived and welcomed by the Taiwanese administration and by the Taiwanese people.
Besides the U.S., where does Taiwan see its most important allies?
So Taiwan's relations with Japan is very important. And of course, in the Indo-Pacific region, relationship with Australia, New Zealand, and of course, in our Southeast Asia, South Asian partners as well. And in the past year and a half, Taiwan has been forming a very strong alliance with countries in Europe as well. Of course, one of the prime example being our partners in the Czech Republic, having the delegation visit Taiwan. That was very well and very much covered by the local media. And it also introduced the Czech Republic to the Taiwanese people. And there's much discussion on the political history and the similarities that the Taiwan experience and compared to the Czech Republic's experience. So all in all, these kind of partnership and visits constitute a very positive enforcement for the Taiwanese, knowing that all of us are under constant threat for the PRC on a daily basis, sometimes multiple times a day.
Final question for both of you. What should the international community do now vis-a-vis this potential risk in the position of Taiwan? Maybe Kathy, let's start with you.
I would say that there's actually a lot to do. For example, voicing support for Taiwan. For example, what's happening in the World Health Assembly. There's already tremendous support for Taiwan's participation in international organization because the world recognized the effort of Taiwan in combating the pandemic. And also, I think there's power by number. So if democracies can come together in support of one another and form the alliance against authoritarian intrusion and influence operation, that will also work for Taiwan as well. I think as the statement presented by the Coalition of Democratic Renewal with Forum 2000 really said it very clearly, when Taiwan's democracy is under attack, it is an attack on all democracies around the world. Because if Taiwan's democracy would have been undermined, as both of you know that the PRC has been really using Taiwan as a testing ground in its aggressive gesture and intrusion of democracies. So, the attack on Taiwan's democracy is actually going to influence on how authoritarian regimes perceive on how democracy will combat their influence. So, Taiwan ultimately is there standing in the front line and also deserve the support of democracies in the international community.
Bill?
I think we must keep in mind, regrettably, that there's not only a diplomatic dimension to this struggle, there's also a military dimension. And this is going to pose some hard choices for the United States and tests for the United States, and I hope those tests are met. Taiwan, on a regular basis, seeks new arms sales from the United States. I hope that the new administration will look favorably on those requests and be willing to accept the pushback from the PRC, which is inevitable if it proceeds. In addition, the principle of freedom of the seas is under threat from China. And I think it's important that the United States and its democratic allies stand fast in support of the internationally recognized freedom of the seas, to reject the PRC's unprincipled and unjustified assertion of plenipotentiary power over so much of the South China Sea. And the United States, I think, has to take the lead in making it clear to the Chinese leadership that any attempt to reunify China through force of arms would be a hinge moment in contemporary history and would set in motion a series of events that might not be controllable. This is very serious. This is akin, I think, to some moments in the 1930s in Europe, when the West failed to draw the line and man the line and defend the line against aggression. And with every failure to hold the line, the position of the aggressor became stronger and the position of the West became weaker. This may sound melodramatic, but I think it's important to keep in mind the possibility that Taiwan could be the trigger for many other serious events involving the PRC, and now is the time to take a stand when the principle is clear and democracy is on the line. So that's my answer, and I hope these bad things don't happen. Nobody in the United States wants a war with China, but at some point, and this may happen in the next 4 years, it may become necessary to take steps that nobody wants to take.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Ketty. This, I think, has summed up very, very well the gravity of this discussion and the importance of democracies to look seriously at this issue, and let's hope for the best and prepare for the worst, as we often say. So, thank you both. Thank you for this discussion, and I look forward to to talking to you again in the future. Bye-bye.
Our
Thank
pleasure.
you.